Welcome to the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast. Whether you are a seasoned professional or a first-time fundraiser, we have the advice you need to take your next step toward major gift mastery. I'm your host, Tom Dauber, President of Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. Now, most mornings, I like to start my day with my wife having coffee. Usually we sit there, we chat, we talk about the problems in the world, and the problems in our lives, and how we might go about solving them. Now, one of the things that's out there quite a bit that we both see a lot. My wife was in higher ed for a good long time, and so was I. Is the issue of federal funding and how the new administration is making changes there. Now, this is not a political podcast by any means, and I have no intention of weighing in on any of that. But as we were talking today, I was reminded that there's some real opportunities. A lot of folks, especially in higher ed, the research types that were dependent upon NIH funding, but also other nonprofits that benefit either directly or indirectly from federal funding. A lot of those folks are in a real place of panic right now. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be. Again, I try to stay neutral on that stuff. But, in this crisis, there is opportunity. And I wanted to take a minute to talk about that and even how just changing the way you're thinking about what's happening just a little bit could help you unlock some alternative streams of funding that you may not have realized were there. I mean, think about, all the folks out there that are collaborators with the federal government on social services or state government who is indirectly, who's being funded by the federal government. Obviously the people that are thinking about NIH grants or appropriations or other types of funding from the federal government. Or even in some cases, you might have a nonprofit that distributes money that they receive from the federal government to other nonprofits. I even think, we've got a kid who's just getting ready to graduate from a program in chemistry. And, I'm hearing through some of my connections that a lot of graduate programs are freezing their acceptance of new PhD candidates, And so, we're thinking about him and his future. And of course, even, if he were to go into pharma or something, how's the changes in the FDA going to impact the pharmaceutical companies and their hiring? And so these things are all on our minds right now. And I'm sure on yours as well. But here's a thing, there's two things that can really help any fundraising effort. The first one, and the most important, of course, is a compelling case that makes real impact, that shows real impact, right? It's not someone going out and if you are a person who's maybe not used to soliciting private funds, like if you're a person that goes after federal grant dollars, you're probably not going to get this. You're probably going to have a lot of presuppositions about what private support looks like. And so you might think that it's influence peddling or arm twisting or begging for money. And it really isn't that. What it is, it's inspiring people. That's what we want to do here. We want to make such an awesome case for our work that anyone would be crazy to pass up an opportunity to invest in it. And believe you me, you may not know this, but there are lots of people out there who are wealthy, who care about the world, who have a sense of social responsibility to use their money wisely, and who are looking for opportunities to make a difference. And what's also true is many of those people have family members that they care about that have been impacted by, various diseases or various social issues or various sorts of things that your nonprofit, your research, the work that you do may directly address. Now, the trick, of course, is finding those people and learning what they care about and then making the case. But all I'm saying is this is anybody can raise money if they can demonstrate to the world that what they're doing is matters, that it's compelling and it makes an impact in this world for good, right? So that's the first piece, a compelling case that makes a real impact. The second thing that can really help any fundraising effort is a true sense of urgency. Now, while it's true that telling someone we're going to go out of business without your help does create a sense of urgency, that type of sense of urgency, you might get some money, but you may never get any money ever again. Because, when you approach things like that, you're also telling the person who's probably good with money that you're bad with money and you're and you're not a sustainable organization and you're probably not handling your finances well, right? So that type of sense of urgency, a negative sense of urgency that casts your organization in a bad light, that's the type you want to stay away from them. However, if you can show a sense of urgency because, if the funding doesn't come in right now, here's the opportunity we're going to miss. Sometimes in a funding scenario, there is sort of this intersection of opportunity that makes this moment right here, right now, the time to invest. This is the ground floor of an opportunity. There is a unique time to impact this issue before things get out of control, or to make a difference in kids' lives now while they're young and growing, and it's a foundational experience for them. Or this is the time to invest in this type of research because there's so many people that are going to benefit from it, right? I think about those of you who are maybe on the ecological side of things. You might be thinking, "Wow, we better get ahead of global warming now while there's still a chance, right now." Or whatever the research area that you're thinking about, it's that intersection that shows why timeliness and support is really important now, and why supporting it later or never is is not going to be helpful, right? So that's how you create a sense of urgency. Now it's true, a lot of folks, especially in higher ed, but in other nonprofits as well, will talk about campaigns, right? And they'll have a campaign deadline, which is great, right? Because what that does, I mean, honestly, campaign deadlines, organizations get to pick when those start and end. Now, sometimes those will be rooted in real things in real time that are not arbitrary, but oftentimes they are arbitrary, and that's okay. But ultimately, a campaign really, in many ways, it's an artificial time frame. It's really to create a sense of urgency. We want to get to $1 million by this date, right? Well, why? Well, sometimes orgs can be a little weak in explaining why that is. But I know some folks that I've worked with where it's like, wow, we've got this opportunity to buy this piece of property right now, and if we don't get on the ball to do these things, well, then we're going to really be missing out, and our mission is going to be compromised as a result, right? So that I'm not speaking against campaigns, but I am just speaking to why they're so prevalent is because they also create a sense of urgency. Well, as you all well know, a change in the way the federal government disperses grants and such, that's definitely creating a sense of urgency, right? People are concerned. Everybody is, whether you're on the right or you're on the left in this issue, the change in, NIH funding and the change to, the overhead from 50% to 15%, that's going to affect people, and that's going to affect universities, and because they're used to funding of a certain type in a certain way. What I'm saying is, if you've not thought about private funding because maybe you haven't had to, this is a good time to do it, because you now have cause to say, wow, there's a need. This need was being taken care of by the NIH. It's not anymore. We can't count on that now. So now we have to look to other institutions, people, organizations, right? Now, part one of that, I was talking about how a compelling case uh, is so important to fundraising. My hope is that anyone who's a regular listener to the show may have spent some time building that strong case, because it's something I harp on a lot as a consultant, as a podcaster, right? Now, if you haven't, if you're sitting there saying, well, Tom, I don't know how I would describe the work I do in a way to convince people it's important. Well, come talk to me. Shoot me an email. We can get together, and it'll cost you some money, but I'm happy to help in that area. It's something I'm good at. But I know, that many of you, you've not had to build that type of case for support. Maybe you've written some grants to the government, and that's a completely different thing in terms of how you make that case, right? You're using probably a lot of numbers and charts and figures and that sort of thing, and those things can be helpful in personal, private sorts of fundraising attempts, and probably a little bit more helpful with foundations specifically. But people are different than organizations. The decision factors that go into saying yes to a solicitation, a request, they're different. They're different. They really have a lot more to do with the emotion of the thing. Now, it has to make sense. It can't just be, oh, you made me cry, so I'm going to give you $1 million. But you've got to really make a case that provokes emotion, and the way you provoke that emotion is very much by understanding what that donor cares about, but then showing how your organization connects to that. So that's where I want to focus today, right? I want to help you pivot from thinking only about federal funding, and really begin to see the opportunities that may be in front of you in the midst of what feels like a crisis. So step one, and this is my mantra here for my company, right? There is no lack of money in the world. There is only a lack of vision. You've got to buy into that. You got to really believe that there is money out there to be had. There are people that care about making a difference in this world, and who have money to give, even in a tough economy. We're experiencing some changes in the stock market right now that are bad for a lot of people. It's so important, though, that you don't project your own scarcity mentality and maybe even your own personal approach to philanthropy on other people that are out there. There are many people who give more when times are bad, right? We saw that during the Great Depression and even during COVID. Like, times were bad during COVID. The economy was crunching down, yet there were some wonderful acts of generosity that were out there during the pandemic, right? But people step up to help others when they see there's a need during a time of crisis, right? And so you've got to trust that that's true. Now, the next thing you need to really be rooted in, and really understand, is how you, and the work you're doing, your organization, how are you making a difference to help others? Tom Dauber here for Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. Fundraising can be hard work, and it can be hard to mentally get into the place you need to be in order to see new opportunities. Everyone struggles with it. We are like the fish in the fishbowl who just can't see the water they're swimming in. That's when having outside expertise comes in handy. For 25 years, I've been helping nonprofits analyze their challenges, discover new ways forward, and develop clear plans that lead to greater fundraising revenues. Now I am available to help your organization develop the abundant vision it needs to inspire new levels of philanthropy at your nonprofit as well. Check out abundantvision.net to start your journey toward greater fundraising success today. Now, back to the show. Now, this is too broad of a topic for me to answer for you on this podcast. But again, it's something that if we had a conversation, we could walk through that and figure that out. But if you're, let's just say you are a researcher at a college or a university, right? Why does your research matter? I mean, clearly it matters. You wouldn't have selected it as your area of expertise if it didn't matter to you. And so certainly you're not the only person in the world that this matters to. And and so you've got to really be thinking about what you're doing and how does it help others, and not just like directly, but indirectly. You know, how does the help you provide impact over a long term the broader world around you, right? There's a great story that I share a lot. I've shared on the show a few times. I'm going to share it again. And I stole it from a book that I don't have in front of me, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's not mine. So the guy that came up with this, thank you. But it tells the story of three bricklayers, right? And person comes up to the first bricklayer and says, "What are you doing?" And the bricklayer says, "Hey, I'm laying bricks." Well, good for him. Goes to the next bricklayer and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm building a church," right? And then he goes to the third bricklayer and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" The third bricklayer, he says, "I'm connecting people with God," right? So you can see each of the bricklayers were doing the same exact thing, but each of them had a successively broader vision, more expansive understanding of the impact of the work they were doing, right? And which one of those bricklayers do you think you'd feel better about helping? Well, sure, the one who was trying to connect people with God. That's a much grander vision and a noble concept, really, than just laying bricks or even building a church, for that matter. I saw this in real life once. There was a an HVAC issue that was preventing the organization I was working for doing research. They needed more air supply in order to run their hoods to do more experiments, right? And this facilities guy, I'd known him for years. He's been around the university a long time, and it was kind of taking some time because sometimes people people have different priorities, right? So I saw him, and I asked him. He said, "Hey, do you know what you're doing?" I mean, not in terms of like, do you know how to do the work you're doing? It was like, do you know what you're working on? And he goes, "Well, yeah, we're just trying to increase the airflow here. We're trying to repair this issue." I said, "Well, that's not just what you're doing. These labs that we're trying to do experiments in, these labs are trying to cure cancer, you know, and the more experiments we can run, the more shots we have on goal towards trying to make steps towards finding a cure." You should have seen him straighten up. This was a man who I'm sure had been impacted, had loved ones impacted by cancer in his life. I'll tell you what, that project got done just a little bit more quickly, I think, because he knew what was on the line, right? It wasn't just getting hoods operational. It was playing a part, even if it was a small one, to help cure cancer. But being able to talk more broadly about, how something, impacts the world is so important. Like even if you're a researcher in environmental sciences and you're studying some insect, and I'm certain, and I don't know it, but whatever bug you're studying as an entomologist, I'm almost certain that if you look at the broader picture of ecology, if that bug isn't around, something bad happens. Either something that eats it has problems, or something that it eats gets out of control, right? Uh, and and so then you can start drawing the bigger picture. If you're a social services group, that maybe you help kids. The thing you want to be thinking about here oh, isn't just, oh, we're helping kids. Talk to me as a donor about what happens to those kids after they graduate. You know, how does that education impact future careers, and how do those future careers impact health outcomes for them and their family? What's it going to mean for their children or their grandchildren that they had this help? Is there going to be generational impact? I'll bet there is. But you've got to take the time to think that through. What is that generational impact? And that's the change you need to share with people, right? Now, as you understand how the help you're providing impacts the broader world around you, the next thing you got to know too, though, is what are the costs to fund that impact, right? And now this part might get hard because in the world, especially like NIH funding, you're talking big grants, and it is harder to find big grants, right? Bigger donations, but they are out there. But the piece of it that gets a little tricky is that overhead piece. Is the indirect costs, which are like they've historically been 50% for R1 institutions, and private organizations don't typically tolerate that type of thing. They're going to want to know what it is you're spending their money on. Indirects, for better or for worse, sometimes you don't necessarily know where that's going. So you're going to want to be really, really clear about what the needs are. And you're going to want to think about that broadly. Like if it is a research project, right? You're going to want to think about, if you're like a professor, what percentage of my time is spent on this research project? And you're going to want to include that percentage of your FTE into that dollar request. I think the mistake that sometimes people make, and that actually limits the size of the solicitation that they're making, is that they don't think about that. They don't necessarily think about the space they're using, because they already have the space. So they're not thinking about, well, I really should be helping keep the lights on with a portion of this request because this request is directly impacted by that. Or I should be thinking about, the percentage of my salary that's going into this project, because really without that salary, this project doesn't happen. Right. So you want to think about all the different things. And really what you should do is kind of build a business plan that describes the entire enterprise involved, and what the total cost of that thing is. And why that's important is private funders typically don't want to be the only person funding something. So if you ask them for 100% of the need, they may say no, right? Unless they're really into what you're doing and who you are, they may say no to that. And so the bigger the picture you can paint about the total cost of the thing, the better that's going to be for you. So again, build out kind of a business plan that describes the entire thing and really shows how each cent is going to be spent, and even when, right? You want your potential donor to understand, if it's $1 million project, we need 500,000 up front. Like without the 500,000, we don't have the equipment, the supplies, all the things that we need to really even get started, right? And then, we need 250K every 6 months for the rest of the remainder of the year, or 2 years, or whatever it is, in order to finish the project. You want to spell all that out, because what a donor doesn't want is to be told, yeah, if you give me $1 million, this project will happen. Well, again, most of these people are, have some success and some savvy when it comes to money. They're going to say, well, how are you going to spend it? When are you going to spend it? Do you need it all now? And, and the other thing too, is when you know the timing, it also gives you a little bit more flexibility in your solicitation, because maybe the person would say no if you ask them for $1 million cash right now. But if the truth is you only need $250,000 a year for the next over a 4-year period, maybe they would say yes. Maybe maybe they've got the budget to afford to give you $250,000 a year for 4 years. So you get a yes where you would have gotten a no. But you can only get to those sorts of things when you actually take the time to do the planning, and get your head around what the math should look like. Lastly, you've also got to believe that private fundraising can support your work. I've been in situations before in organizations where people have felt as if no one will support our work. No one's interested in this, and kind of a woe is me, scarcity mentality sort of approach. But then if you look around the world of nonprofits, what you'll see is other organizations doing similar work, getting private donations. And so you're sitting there saying, well, no one supports this type of work. Well, that's simply not true. You're looking at yourself and you're not really understanding what's real, right? So you've got to believe that private fundraising can support your work, or else you'll never put the work into it that you need to be successful. And trust me, this will take work. This will not happen overnight. It's very rare that someone just goes out and immediately finds the type of donor they need for the thing they need. But if you will change the way you think about philanthropy, if you will take the time to meet with potential donors, if you'll do the homework to be able to talk about your work in a compelling way, and if you'll ask for the help that you need to make the change that the world needs, I believe that you're going to find a good bit of that funding. Now, I'm not promising you that whatever the funding streams were that you got from the federal government are just going to come right back through other sources, but at least you can get some of that, right? So why not take that opportunity right now when people are concerned about these things, when you don't have to convince people that the funding scenario in the world has changed. It's all over the news. People are feeling nervous. And folks that have a proclivity for giving, some of them really are like, well, how do I fix this? What do I do? Well, here's something you can do. You can help this one researcher, or you can help this one program that was always dependent on federal funding. You can be the one to make the difference here, right? People want to hear that type of message. And you don't have to feel bad about letting them know. I know this is a tough time. And in no way do I want to make light of what's happening. A lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of folks are struggling right now, trying to understand the world that we're living in. My hope in sharing this episode today is just to help you find a little bit of hope during this time, and maybe some approaches to support your work that you haven't tried before. Because I've seen it happen. Like I'll give you just a real quick example before we close up here. I know of a researcher who's a cancer researcher who was pretty much an NIH funding sort of guy. And, there was a certain amount of startup money that this person needed for their lab if they were going to make a move to a new organization. Now, typically, again, that type of money is usually going to come through federal grants and those sorts of things. But in this particular case, it just wasn't available. And so we went to donors. We started calling people that we knew. This person was a cancer researcher. And we started calling people that we knew cared about the organization and who cared about this area of research. We said, hey, this is a thing that's happening. We know this is last minute. This isn't the way we normally like to make our requests, but we know you care. We knew you'd want to know about this opportunity, because if we can get the funding we need right now, we can do this thing. And this will make a difference for the reputation of our school, for the quality of our research, and for the state of, cancer research overall. We can do this with your help. And we got some great gifts out of that. We had one person offer on the spot to give us $500,000. It was fantastic. So what I'm saying is, no matter what field you're in, there are people that care about things related to that. And if you need some coaching, if you need some help, that's what I do. Give me a call, reach out, go to my website, abundantvision.net, and schedule some time with me. Love to talk with you about it. And if you need a coach, I'm available. Anyway, thanks again. Hang in there, and look forward to our next episode together. Now, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast provider. I'm your host, Tom Dauber. Thank you for joining me as we journey together towards major gift mastery on the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast.